Howdy, and welcome to another episode of Adult Onset Horsemanship. I'm your host, Daniel Dolphin.
I wanted to take just a minute on this podcast episode to tell you a little bit about the online course that we are offering now, the Bit Course 2.0, Understanding How and Why Bits Function. You can find it at the website, thebitcourse.com, which will be linked in the show notes. This is a very comprehensive course. We've got two different versions. There's a masterclass version where weekly we have live calls and go over the modules and the study guide. That course has been running 25 to 30 hours over the course of 7 weeks. If you take that version, you're also eligible to go through our BIT certification program and take that test. It's at no additional cost if you want to add consulting about bits to your repertoire of body work or whatever else you might be doing. We also will have an evergreen version that you can take anytime you work at your own pace. It is less expensive. It's also a lot less content. You don't have the weekly Zoom calls with me. Those are going about 2 to 2.5 hours each week. So the masterclass course winds up 25, 30 hours long. The evergreen course you're going to do in 12 to 15, something like that. So check it out. You can go to thebitcourse.com, sign up for the free newsletter. You'll get a 30-minute video on the foamy mouth and all of the implications of that, as well as 5 or 6 articles that I've written regarding bits. Get a feel for the content. This will absolutely be some of the best money and time you have ever spent on your horsemanship journey, I assure you. And it is not discipline specific. We cover just about every aspect of the horse world that you can think of. Our guest today is Miss Gillian Higgins from the UK. She is the owner of Horses Inside Out, a world-renowned equine anatomy and physiology educator and author. She teaches about welfare issues and anatomical training through lectures, demos, online courses, articles, and books. Obviously, better understanding of equine anatomy benefits training and management. Gillian is perhaps best known for her anatomical art, painting musculoskeletal and other anatomical systems on the outside of the horse for us to see these aspects at work in motion. Horses inside and out. Makes sense, right? Gillian, how are you this morning?
I am very well, thank you, Daniel. And I'd like to say a very big thank you for inviting me on your show. It is a pleasure to be here.
Well, it was a pleasure to meet you. We met at Jim Masterson's international conference, which was in the UK, and you were another of the presenters there, and I really enjoyed.
Correct. Yes.
I really enjoyed everything that you brought to the table. Your passion was evident, as was your deep knowledge, and then you did a demonstration with a live horse, and that's always the separation. Some people can sound good in the talk, but when they get a live horse in front of them, it changes. And you were obviously still an expert with the actual horse right there in front of you. So I appreciated meeting you and what you talked about, and I'm looking forward to sharing some of that with my audience today with you. So.
Oh, that's great. Well, you know what? I think you said about passion and the horses. For me, I am so lucky because 3 of my biggest passions I've been able to combine to make a business. And that, of course, is horses, anatomy, and being a bit creative on the art side. So I'm so lucky to be able to have that in my life.
Well, very good. We'll get into that in a minute. But before I forget, let's get into the lightning round icebreaker questions. And these are for points, Gillian, so you want to be on your A game here, okay?
They're for points. So who's the winner then at the moment? What's the league? What's the highest points?
I believe we're around the 2,200, 2,300 points range at this point, something like that. So I feel like you're going to get there, though. I have a good feeling about it. If you were a Jedi, what percent chance would there be that you would misuse the Force?
I don't know. Can we not have that one? That's a really bad one because I don't watch Star Wars at all.
Okay. What is your favorite way to relax? That's my alternate question there.
Okay, oh good. Favorite way to relax? Walking the dogs. I love walking the dogs. I love getting outside in the countryside, going out for a hack with the horses. Yeah, that's it.
Okay. Morning or evening?
Morning, definitely.
I don't understand evening people. Yeah, my wife is an evening person, and it is a constant source of pain in the neck around here. Um, what is your favorite way to treat aches and pains?
Bath, hot tub.
Hot
Is
bath?
this for me personally or the
For
horses?
you? Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, yeah. Give me a hot bath, definitely.
Do you have a physical fitness stretching protocol routine type of thing?
Yes, I do. I swim 3 times a week. I try and do a big dog walk 3 times a week, and then try and ride most days or every day that I'm home at least.
That has to be when we were in the UK. That was my first time over there, but I definitely noticed how outside and walking and hiking and the dogs, and y'all are a pretty active country. You really, really are. I don't know why that surprised me. Maybe I'm used to lazy Americans or something, but I mean, it was just constant. People were out, even in bad weather. The rain didn't slow them down the least. They
Oh
were
no,
out there getting it. I liked it. Um,
I struggle if I can't get outside. If I'm perfectly honest, I that's something I struggle with. Being cooped up, I need to move, and I like fresh air. So yeah.
I know just what you mean. When I decided to be a horse trainer, I had no idea how many hours I would spend in an office behind a computer, and sometimes you got to just turn it off and go outside and play with a horse, right? Bay or sorrel? What's your
Bay.
favorite color? Bay?
Yeah. Now you see, when
Okay.
you say sorrel, you mean something different to what we mean in the UK, don't you?
So I differentiate that sorrel and chestnut are two different colors, but
Okay.
I guess you're meaning chestnut there, huh?
Yeah, yeah, but I've got to go bay because I've got a gorgeous bay gelding. He's got lovely dapples. He's my number one horse at the moment, so I'm leaning towards the bay.
So I feel like I say this with just about every guest, and the audience may be sick of it, but this is one of those really interesting things to me with these questions. It's like 80 or 90% of people prefer bay horses. I thought
But
it would be half and half.
if you'd had grey in the mix, I'm sorry, but I would be all the way in the grey camp. But
Oh, you
then
can pick your
look at
own.
my
I'm
horses.
just, yeah, you can pick your own. So that's if gray beats it for you. Um,
Yeah.
like my favorite color in horse is a dark gray with dapples and dark points. It just
Yes.
doesn't get any better than that for me, you know.
They are stunning, I think. The grey horse is stunning. Yeah.
When you meet a set of twins, do you ever have the urge to tell them that at least one of them was unplanned?
No. But
Will
I
you
love
after I have posed that question to you?
probably.
Depends on how annoying they are.
Oh dear.
Well, you've already alluded to this a little bit, but dogs or cats?
Dogs.
What kind
Yeah.
of dogs do you have?
Labradors. We've got a black Labrador and a chocolate Labrador. Hugo and Poppy, fabulous. And I recently had a weekend at the beach, and it was just great to have the dogs running alongside whilst I was cantering along on the horse. It was so special.
So I'm a dog person too. When you say Labrador in America, people are going to think of something a little bit different too. So there actually are very distinct bloodlines for British and American labs. Y'all tend to have
Okay.
a shorter, stockier dog, where we tend to have a longer, leaner, rangier, leggier type of a dog that's also a little neurotic. They'll tear your whole house up. Like until they're 2 or 3, they're an absolute nightmare to have around because they have so much energy. Where the British lab is much more laid back, low key, sort of the gentleman's dog.
Yes.
My first dog ever was actually a British black lab named Anne, and I just adored her. Absolute soft spot in my heart.
Yeah.
So
So we have what we call show Labradors and working labs, and I wonder if the working lab is closer to your because they tend to be leaner and a bit fitter. But I must admit, they're still on the quiet side compared to some of the other crazy breeds.
Yeah, the labs here, the working lines are like almost like Malinois. They're like on cocaine. They are just
Really?
absolutely wired for, yes, ma'am. So they're not necessarily the family dog that you want. Okay, next question. Apparently, I was kind of hungry when I wrote some of these because we have a bunch of food questions in here. Does pineapple belong on pizza?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Are you a thick or thin crust gal?
Thin.
Thin. Okay. Are you a cook yourself?
Not really.
Not really. Okay. That's fair enough. How many holes would you say are in a straw?
Sorry.
How many
What?
holes are in a straw? Like a
One.
drinking straw.
One.
One. Okay. Very good. Only correct answer. Absolutely. Do you have a horse industry related pet peeve?
Probably loads.
Would you like to share one with us?
Oh, a pet peeve. Oh, you see, I wish you'd told me that in advance because I could have come up with a whole load of them. So I think there are a lot of misconceptions within the horse industry. And I think this relates back to anatomy, and we all need to have a really good understanding of how the horse works, because there seems to be quite a lot of, whether you want to call them misconceptions or erroneous concepts. And I think social media has got a lot to do with this, in that someone will pose a theory, an idea, and back it up with theories and ideas, which kind of makes sense when you listen to the story. But then when you go back to the anatomy, it's just not true. It just doesn't quite work. And some people would call them UFOs, some people would call them erroneous concepts or misconceptions. But I think there's quite a few misconceptions about forms of different therapy, about different structures causing problems within the body, about anatomical structures. And I think that there's quite a few of those out there, and I think it is really, really hard for people to know what is correct and what is somebody's idea, somebody's theory. And then we have this concept of science, and people say, oh, but it's based on science, it's based on scientific proof. And the problem with scientific proof is, unfortunately, there aren't enough scientists out there to prove every single concept. And I think that sometimes science is used for marketing, and this does, talking about pet peeves, I think that's probably annoys me. People will use science for marketing rather than true foundations, and I think that can be misleading. So, and I could go into that in a lot more detail, but I appreciate this is supposed to be the quick round questions. So yeah, that's a long answer.
I have taken a note, so we will definitely get back into that later, because I have some things to say on that as well. And I honestly do not know if this is a question that'll make a lot of sense in the UK or not, but feral or spoiled, which type of horse would you prefer to deal with? But I don't know if y'all really have very many feral horses in the UK, or if they're pretty much all handled a lot right from the beginning.
We do have the New Forest ponies and the Dartmoor ponies and the Shetland ponies. Even your New Forest, though, they are technically wild. They're sort of rounded up once a year for care, maintenance. But one of those, or a spoilt one, probably one of those. Although they're all a little bit too small for me, let's be honest.
Crunchy or smooth peanut butter?
Crunchy.
Absolutely. There we go. All right. Would you tell us something unexpected about you?
I really do have skeletons in my closet.
All right. So it's the literal ones I'm expecting, but are there figurative ones there as well, or what?
No, just literal ones.
So is that you're an anatomical expert? Is your house just filled with there's vertebrae here and there and skulls
Well,
and pelvises and
yeah, but well, I say it was 7 years ago, we moved to this place where we are now and started building my dream of having the horses at home, but also a classroom and skeleton store. There you go, skeleton closet. So we're gradually trying to move the bones out of the house into this sort of purpose-built area. But I still do have, one of the skeletons in my dining room at the moment.
nothing wrong with that. I have quite the skull collection and yeah, so that's okay. You mix when it's your passion and your whole life. You know your house and your office kind of overlap. So don't they? No harm, no foul there, as far as I'm concerned.
Absolutely.
If you could choose any new skill or superpower or ability, what would you choose?
I have always wanted to be able to fly. I dream about flying. There you go. That would be my superpower. I'd love to be able to fly.
I'm right there with you. That there's not even a close second place. Like that one, absolutely, that's the pick for me. Thoughts or feelings? Which one drives you more? You more a cerebral person or the intuitive, go with your gut kind of person?
Can I have both? Is that allowed?
You can. As I think, like when as I know you and I've talked with you and stuff, to me, you're definitely the thoughts person, but then you do have the artist side and all of that to you as well. So I could see there need to be a blend there for you. You've got that unique, yes, ma'am.
There we go.
Although one of the things, so let me say this. I know we're going to get into this in a little bit, but the horse that we can see behind you on the wall there, your big gray horse who you had for pretty much his whole life, when it came time to let him go, you actually, is that the skeleton that is in your dining room right now, or?
That is one of the skeletons in my classroom, yes. So we built him in a trotting pose, and that was a really emotional journey. I just felt so much. I think some people would think I'm slightly crazy, but for me, he was always going to be a skeleton. He was the horse that was around when I started Horses Inside Out 18 years ago. He's been with me on the whole journey. He has helped so many people learn about anatomy, biomechanics. He's on the front cover of all my books. He's in my videos. So many people have seen him at lecture demonstrations. I think he's touched so many horses through their owners, and for me it would be a disservice for him not to be a skeleton and not to carry on teaching about anatomy and biomechanics. So I use him on my courses, and we are later this year actually going to be releasing a whole documentary series with a whole host of professionals. It's going to be called The Bare Bones of the Matter, and we're going to be delving into topics around the equine industry that challenge horse owners, riders, coaches, etc. in the equine world. So from dentistry to saddlery, symmetry, maintaining healthy bones, the full works, the whole of Freddie's team are coming together to using him as a case study. And that's also going to sort of carry on his legacy. But I don't think there's many horses that have had their lives dissected quite as much as Freddie has. And he's just been such a special horse for so many reasons.
Well, I really have to commend you on that decision and your bravery and ability to be able to do that. My special horse that's been with me a long time is in his 20s now, and I still do use him. He's semi-retired. He's still sound, but I certainly try not to put 12-hour days on him anymore and that sort of thing. And I've already decided that when it comes time to let him go, I'm not going to keep his skull or any of that stuff. I couldn't do it. I know there's no way I could. I would pick his skull up in front of a crowd and break down right there. So your ability
Yeah,
to be able to do that with Freddie is commendable for sure.
I think for me, he's been such a big part of my life. I want him to carry on being part of it, and maybe it's because I'm an anatomist. I have this separation between the bones and Freddie. To me, Freddie is not his skeleton. Those are his bones. That's what's been left behind. He's somewhere else, and I really do believe this. That yeah, I mean, we're probably getting into a topic that's way out there. What happens after death? But yeah, for me, he's not his bone. Freddie is not his bones, and so I think it's that separation really, and knowing where he is, or not quite knowing where he is, but he's not in the bones. I know that.
Okay, moving on to a happier topic. What year did music end for you? Everybody kind of has that point at which they stop keeping up with new music. Maybe you haven't hit it yet. I don't know.
I
But
see what you mean. Yeah, okay. I was thinking, I love music. Yeah, I think probably when I left school. I remember
okay.
driving to school, that was the time we'd listen to, yeah, when I was at school, I'd be listening to Top of the Pops and that sort of thing. So, yeah, that was pretty much way back then.
So who's your favorite British band, or what type of music are you an
So
Adele
I can tell
girl,
you,
or?
at the moment, I'm currently into the piano guys. I really quite like them. They're really good painting music. I enjoy to have different music for different times.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so that's good.
Okay.
Piano guys.
Are you decisive or indecisive?
Oh, indecisive. I like to keep my options open. But I can sometimes be very decisive. I think I take my time, but when I know once I'm on it, I'm on it.
You're a complex lady, Gillian, and I think that's part of what I really like about you. So this is one of those things. I edit these podcasts. Invariably, the people that wind up answering indecisive take 3 minutes to get there, and you decisively answered indecisive. I've only had
Indecisive.
2 or 3 of you that have done that, and I find that absolutely intriguing. Like you're the puzzle I now want to take apart and analyze from every angle and see what is going on here. You got that paradox in you of all of these different thoughts and feelings, decisively indecisive. I love it. Absolutely love it.
Oh, brilliant.
Do you have a favorite piece of tack or horse related tool?
Poles.
Poles. Okay.
There you go.
So,
So I was very decisive there, wasn't I?
so it's not a sentimental tool. It's just that this is the most bang for your buck, practical, useful thing you can have for
Well, when
your
you
horse,
say a piece
basically.
of tack or equipment, for me, the bits, the bridle, the saddle, or a training aid or anything, that's not it. For me, if I was to pick a piece of equipment, I think that every rider should have, and not just one, obviously, they need more than I think pole work is fantastic. And one of the reasons I really love pole work is it's a really good way of encouraging your horse to work correctly or to change and improve his posture without force. So we're not forcing him to do it. In fact, he's actually looking at the poles and adjusting his body shape because he's making the decision. And I think most people will know if you can get somebody or a horse to decide to do something, rather than forcing them to do it, you will always end up with a better result. So for me, pole work is just such a formidable tool that we should all employ really for improving posture, improving their core strength, maintaining musculoskeletal health, and fundamentally, if we're all riding our horses, I'm off on one now, if
Go
we
ahead.
want to ride horses, if we want to own horses, it's up to us to make sure that they're in the best possible condition to be able to do that. They need to be in the best posture. So we do need to do things to help strengthen those muscles that are going to be involved in carrying the weight of the rider, that are going to be involved in supporting good posture. And I really very strongly believe that we need to take responsibility for this. And I think pole work is a superb way of, it's only one way. There are lots and lots of others that I also love. You said a tool or a piece of equipment. So yeah, that's my piece of equipment I'm going with. Poles.
Very good. What is the best smell in the barn?
Oh, either fresh haylage or new leather.
Okay.
Can I have two?
Yeah. So I have a question for you here.
But I don't feed haylage.
Okay. When you say haylage, so in the U.S. that would be considered a fermented product with a fairly high
silage.
Well, silage and haylage in the U.S. are similar. Haylage has a lower moisture content than silage, but hay has the lowest moisture content. So it'd be three separate things. So when you say haylage, are you meaning what we would call hay, or do you mean actual haylage?
Well, so for me, haylage is something that is partially dried in the field, then wrapped, then baled and wrapped, whereas hay is dried completely, baled but never wrapped.
Okay.
So haylage is and I think the reason you get that smell is because when it's got plastic around, you unwrap it and it shoots out.
Mm-hmm. You got an anaerobic environment and some fermentation involved in there and all of that.
No, there shouldn't be fermentation. Well, that's probably getting into an area. Okay, I'll give you a different smell. How about this? Hay steamers. So we have a hay steamer of a horse that's got some breathing issues, and that's lovely. That's very nice too.
Okay. All right. I'm just looking for you wouldn't think there's a British American language barrier, but there is. There are certain terms that mean different things. So that's what I'm trying to get into there. Sweet, salty, or spicy?
Sweet.
Okay. What is your favorite dinosaur or deep sea creature?
Pass. I don't know.
Okay. I thought for sure here we have the anatomists, the skeletons. There's got to be a museum with this big thing in it.
I love going to museums. I love the Natural History Museum, and I do love looking at the skeletons, and I love looking at how the different joints have changed over time. So looking at a skeleton and comparing it to the modern day horse or other evolutionary ancestors of the horse as well. Absolutely love that. I think bones tell us a story, and it's great to be able to read those stories in skeletons. It's fascinating, absolutely fascinating.
Yes, ma'am. Have you ever had a UFO encounter?
No.
That was one of those throwaway.
Apart from the highlights. But that's another story.
Okay. That's another one of those throwaway questions I had in here, and then a few people said yes, and I was like, okay, I have to keep that now.
I have had my saddler told me a story about here who was fitting a saddle for this lady, and that apparently a ghost walked through the wall and spooked the horse, and the lady fell off, and she said, "Did you see that?" How much of that I believe, I don't know, but anyway, that's someone else's story, not mine.
On a scale of 1 to 10, what is your favorite preferred temperament of horse? So hot versus cold natured and so forth. Do y'all do that in the UK or?
So like I would say super friendly is going to be. So what you want me to do to put them on? Oh my goodness, right?
Yeah. So like 10 would be a very, very hot natured, can't stand still, forward to the degree that you can't manage them, and 1 would be on death's doorstep, can't make him move, just standing there like a plug basically, and then you have everything in between. So
I'd say your number 1 is lame on all 4 legs. And I'd say your number 10 is probably running away from pain. So I'm going to go with 5 in the middle.
Okay, I like it. That's a perspective right there. I like it. Okay, well, Gillian, that has brought us to the conclusion here. Let me tally up your score. I am happy to tell you that you have broken the 2,600 mark. You have scored 2,605 points. You are all-time point leader, Gillian. You have won the game. And so that entitles you to either an awkward silence or a genuine compliment, your choice.
I think I just gave you the awkward silence, didn't I?
I like it. I have fun guessing which people are going to pick, and I have been surprised before. So,
well, you see, being British, I couldn't possibly say a genuine compliment. That is against our nature, isn't it?
I kind of already gave you one. I was trying to slip something in there about the paradox and all of that stuff, and how passionate you are about this, and also how deep your knowledge goes. Like, there are certain muscles and things that everybody knows about, but in your presentation, I mean, you got down to the nitty gritty tertiary scale of little finite things that are in there, and they can only move this way. And I appreciate that. The not everybody wants to go that deep, but a few of us have to anyway, right? You have to have the whole picture in front of you, even if it takes years to understand something that only affects it 5% or whatever. So, okay, well, Gillian, let's get into the nuts and bolts of all of this. Would you tell us a little bit about you and your background, kind of your educational background, and what was the starting point for you here that said, I want to study anatomy and paint on horses? What catalyst drove you there? And let me also say this. So the painting on horses has become more and more common, but you've been doing this a long time. So are you the originator of this idea, or were there others that were at it?
I can't say I'm the original, because, sure, cowboys and Indians were painting horses way years and years ago. But I would certainly say I am the first person that's taken it to the extent that I have. I've painted every single anatomical system on the horse, so not just the muscles and skeleton, but the digestive system, respiratory system, repro system, all of it, from in front and behind and above, as well as the side where appropriate. And so that was a project that we did for Horse Anatomy for Performance. More recently, I tried to do every single movement that the horse performs, and this was a project for Anatomy in Action, this one. And I mean, that's quite a bold statement, every single movement that the horse performs, because there are so many movements that we don't define. But yeah, certainly all the gaits, different types of jumps, all different dressage moves. And again, not just from the side, but from above. We did drone work on an aqua treadmill, work on a dry treadmill, as well as in front and behind. So that was a massive project. So for me, yeah, I think I was the first person to take it to this level. And I think there definitely has been an increase in people painting horses. I like to think slightly inspired by my work and what I do, which I see as a real compliment. But yeah, I don't think there's anyone quite as prolific in the painting as and made a business of it in quite the same way. And to go back to your first question, it was never really planned. I didn't wake up one day and say, right, I'm going to have my own business where I paint horses for a living. Although I like to think it is more than just painting horses now. But it was something that grew organically. So I've always loved horses. I didn't get my first horse until I was 18. I worked on different yards, an eventing yard. I did quite a lot of riding of naughty ponies because I didn't have my own horse. I was keen to ride anything. And being young and quite small and probably slightly crazy means that people are quite keen to put you on those naughty horses. So I had quite a bit of experience riding. I'm going to say naughty at this stage because when I was that age, that would be a pet hate question, the use of the word naughty. But yes, I don't believe that horses are naughty, by the way. This is a side. I think that they react to how we train them, and they react to pain. So if a horse is being perceived as naughty, is it bucking a person off because it's learned that if it bucks, the rider comes off and that's release of pressure? Or is it bucking because it's in pain? I don't truly believe that horses are, vindictively naughty. Anyway, so when I was young, I got to ride quite a lot of horses that other people didn't want to ride. I should put it that way. And then when I was 18, I finally persuaded my parents to get me a horse, and that this was something that I really did want to do. And I did quite a lot of eventing. I evented up to advanced level. I was trained by Caroline Moore, who's a fellow in the British Horse Society. She's a performance coach. She was absolutely fantastic. And I helped to form a lot of my exercise and riding basics behind the scenes. So she supported me through my British Horse Society exams and helped me get up to my BHS senior coach. So she's been a big part of forming me on the riding, training and coaching side. So having competed up to advanced level eventing, also did dressage and show jumping as well, but the eventing was the big thing. Involves quite a lot of fitness training as well as skills training. And for me, that has helped to form who I am really, and what Horses Inside Out is. So I've got the training and the riding background. I was always interested in the anatomy. I think I've always been interested in anatomy ever since I was little, just, fascinated by how things are made. And I've always been arty, I should say. I've always liked painting and drawing. Although I will say, I remember at school, my art teacher, we had this project when I was at school in art class, and we had to write a word, I can't remember what the word was, using fairies, the shape of these fairies. And I remember completely random, I remember the art teacher saying to me, "Now, Gillian, fairies don't have a black outline round the outside of them." The funny thing is, now, first of all, how does she know fairies don't have a black outline round the outside? And secondly, it's funny now when I look at my art, all the skeletons have got black outlines. So that always just makes me giggle a little bit. Anyway, so the art side's always been there. The riding and the training and the coaching has been a big part of my life. And I evented, so I went up to advanced when I was younger, and then with Freddie we went up to intermediate level together. And then there's the anatomy and the therapy side. So I was at university studying equine science and international business management. When I went to university, unfortunately, there were no veterinary physiotherapy degrees available. Otherwise, I'm pretty sure that's the path that I would have taken. So instead, I carried on with my BHS exams. I was doing my degree. Before I went to university, I trained as a human sports and remedial therapist. And this was fantastic because I was able to work through university as a human therapist, treating people rather than, say, working in a pub or something like that. So by the time I got to my end of my university, I'd built up quite a clientele in and around that area. At the same time as I was at university, I trained with Mary Bromley. I don't know if you've heard of her. She was one of the original horse physiotherapists. And she was, her work has been pioneering within the equine physiotherapy world. And so I trained with her. I then went on and did a chiropractic. I say a chiropractic course. It doesn't mean I'm a chiropractor, because in the UK we have different laws, and chiropractor is a protected title. So you can only call yourself a chiropractor if you're a human chiropractor. But I learned these equine chiropractic techniques, so that was added to the mix. And then basically from there on in, I just went on and did different postgraduate the equine therapy courses, physiotherapy, and lots and lots of other courses that have added up to where I am. But it was a combination of all of this, really. I was working as a coach and a therapist on my travels. I realized that many people could benefit from a better understanding of how horses work. And so I started off just doing some workshops for my clients. And I was the British Horse Society, I was on the committee, what was it? It was marketing and public liaison officer, I think, for the BHS, just at the local committee in the charity there. And so I did a bit of work with them as well, but started off doing these series of workshops for horse owners. One of the questions that I got asked quite a lot, of course, was about the positioning of the horse's neck, or why is my horse sore in this area? And I'd be explaining about posture. And I thought there's so many things that we could do to help people, A, learn more about their horse that they're riding, and B, help them make their horses more comfortable. And so I started off doing these workshops to illustrate basic massage techniques, stretches, strengthening exercises that they could do to improve their horse's comfort. And that's basically how it started. My mum was a primary school teacher, and she had some kiddie paint in her garage at home, so I used some of that to indicate. And I got Freddie at the time. He was I think he was a 6-year-old, and I just indicated with a little bit of paint here and there where some of the structures were, just to highlight how stretching certain areas would affect different parts of the horse's body differently. And then at the very last series, the last sort of a little talk in the series, we did it on the musculoskeletal system, and I spent half an hour, I think, painting the muscles and skeleton on the horse before I started this talk. So the reason I say half an hour, you think, oh yeah, loads of time. I mean, the quality of the painting for that first ever muscles and skeleton, considering now if I was to paint a skeleton on a horse, I'd be allowing at least 4 hours, and that's just for one horse. For a lecture demonstration now, I do 2 sides of 2 horses, and we allow 6 hours. So the quality of the painting has significantly increased from those early days. But that's how it started. And then I was a member of the Event Horse Owners Association, and they heard that I'd done this little series of workshops, and would I do something at their they had an award ceremony, and did that there. And then somebody else at that saw the presentation and wanted me to do a lecture demonstration for them. So basically every presentation I gave, it led to another one and led to another one. So as I say, it wasn't planned. It just seemed to snowball. And I think that was the great thing about it. And I had the painting improved, obviously, but having this great idea, I knew you can't patent a method. It's just something that I loved so much. I just wanted to run with it. And that's exactly what we did. So, and here we are. 18 years later, over 1,000 horses painted, 11 books, 23 countries, 5 continents, I think. Yeah, so we've been all over doing it. It's fantastic. And I still love it.
I was going to ask you how long it takes to paint a horse. So 6 hours to do 2 half horses, basically.
Oh, to do both sides of 2 horses.
Oh,
and
okay.
That's with people helping. And one of the things that takes quite a long time is waiting for the paint to dry, believe it or not. So we put a first layer of paint on, and then it's important to me that layer dries before we put any more paint on top. So there is quite a bit of hanging around. And I think as well, for me, it needs to be quite a calm process. And my work as a therapist and my work painting horses, I know, and I'm sure you'll relate to this, but your energy and how you are affects how the horse is. So if you've got people standing outside the stable having an argument, the horse is going to be so much more tense and is unlikely to stand still. So having the right team of helpers around you is really, really important, just to keep the horse nice and relaxed during the process. And I want it to be a relaxing and calm process. If you're short on time and rushing, the horses pick up on it and it's not going to work. So it's always important, I would say, it's always important to make time to have a cup of tea. Having a cup of tea is very, very important in the painting process for more reasons than one. And and if the horse needs to go out to have some grass in hand or go for a little walk or just just have some time, and that's really important. I think people don't often realize how much energy it takes out of a horse being with them for that length of time as well, because most people, oh yeah, I'm with my horse every single day, but realistically, how long are you actually with them? You might ride them for an hour, you might spend half an hour before grooming and tacking up, and half an hour after, washing off and faffing, but not 6 hours just with them. It's quite a long time. So then you put, 3 or 4 people in there in with them, and it becomes quite it can be a bit mentally tiring if they're not used to it.
I could certainly see that. I've often described horses, particularly to people that are new to horses, as being very ticklish, and they don't really like to be touched softly. And I'm imagining your painting on them might kind of trigger that sort of, no, they handle it pretty well. Or...
I think so. First of all, how I pick which horses are going to be painted is that I've got quite a long list of requirements. So if your horse is ticklish, if he doesn't like being groomed, then absolutely, it's not going to be one that will be chosen to be painted. So most horse owners know if they enjoy being groomed, they're going to be absolutely fine. I would say your comment on light touch versus a firm touch, I would also put behind that confidence. So because I think sometimes a light touch can be misinterpreted as what if you don't quite know what you're going to do, you put your hand on a bit tentatively, and what is the horse going to kick? Is it going to tickle? Whereas if you put your hand on the horse in a way that says, I am putting my hand here, the horse can then, oh right, this person knows what they're doing. So it's the same with a paintbrush. if you are painting with confidence, with smooth, putting the paint on smoothly, but with a confident pressure, long strokes, they absolutely love it. If you come in a bit tentatively, that's when you get like the fly tickle reaction. But so I do have a number of techniques though to help with this. So one of them is when we come to do the black lining, often using quite a little brush, I would always put my other hand on the horse next to the area where I'm about to paint. You'd never go in with a paintbrush, say, to the stifle, thinking, oh my goodness, what's going to happen? You would always put your other hand on first that says, I am here, this is what I'm doing. And it comes back to your energy. I'm a big believer in how you are affects the horse. And this doesn't just apply to painting horses, because I'm pretty sure everyone listening isn't going to be thinking about painting horses, but applying this to how you handle the horse when you're walking around it, when you're grooming, when you're around the horse. That to me is it's a big part of it. Your energy.
I like to say that not all people read horses for a living, but all horses read people for a living.
Absolutely. So, do you know what? There's so many. So we one part of Horses Inside Out is I run massage courses for horse owners, and we've got an online massage course as well as doing physical courses. But that is one of the biggest parts of this. And again, it doesn't just apply to massage; it applies to anything that we do with horses, but reading horses. And I am convinced that if you react to a response the horse gives you, the horse will like you more, because they know that somehow you're trying to listen to them, their attempts at communication. And if a horse is putting his ears back or picking up a back leg, you have missed a whole host of other messages that the horse is trying to pass on to you. That moment when he lifted his left nostril and turned his head to his eye, just out the corner of his eye, he looked at you. He's going to do a whole load of little responses before he gets to the big demonstrative kick. And I think we, again, as horse owners, we need to take responsibility for learning this stuff, because it really will make a difference. And in this modern day world where keeping animals is very, very different. Modern society is not used to animals, and I think that non-horsey people won't always understand that. So we really need to make sure as horsey people that we don't miss any signs. We listen to the horses, that we read them as much as we possibly can.
on that topic, I would say that I very, very commonly come across people who are in what I affectionately term as the unicorn syndrome. So they are standing next to a romanticized mythical creature in their mind, and that is the prism they look at the horse through, and they don't see the real horse that pins its ears or nips at them or shows them all of these signs. And it's one of the biggest things that transitions you from a beginner to an intermediate is when you stop seeing the unicorn and start seeing the actual horse standing in front of you. I have people all the time that are telling me, oh, he loves when I do this. And I'm looking at the horse and I'm saying, no, he pretty much hates that. You need to stop that right now. You're being threatened at the moment, and they just are completely oblivious to the fact that that's going on,
Yeah.
So,
yeah, the number of times I've been painting horses and the owner's not in the barn. And we're quite happy in a nice, it really is, it's like therapeutic. Both you and the horse enter this sort of zone. I suppose in many ways it's like having, I don't know, having exfoliation or a face pack done at the spa. That's what I sort of liken it to. But the horse, both me and the horse were super chilled. And then the owner comes in and the energy changes and the horse changes and they can't see it. And I think one thing that we're also often not aware of is, you've had a day at the office, maybe not that I know what that's like, but, a day at the office, it's been difficult. Maybe you've been dealing with some difficult clients. You come home in rush hour and you've had a bit of road rage and people have been banging the horn or whatever at you. And then you walk into the horse's stable and you're carrying all this stress from the day, and the horse absolutely will pick up on it. And I think we need to be really careful to get rid of that negative energy and take the opportunity as well to say to ourselves, right, I've got to get rid of this because I don't want that to affect the relationship with my horse. I think we really need to take care to do that.
Very good. I have a mailbox at my arena, and that is exactly what that is for you to take all of your baggage and emotions and bullshit. And the fact that I work with a decent number of people that got hurt or something like that with the horse, and now they're trying to build their confidence back. And so your fears, whatever emotions you're carrying right now, you put that in the mailbox and you can pick it back up when you leave.
Do you actually get them to write on a piece of paper and post it in the mailbox?
No, I don't go as far as the paper generally, but I do make them open the mailbox and figuratively put it in there. And yeah, maybe we'll take a deep breath a couple of times or something like that. Or I'm really big into the dad joke kind of stuff. I have a whole list in my phone of what I call amygdala hijack questions. So it has to be a statement made. Basically, I am trying to elicit the "what the fuck did he just say?" response. That's kind of what I need. So I need to shock them a little bit, and then that'll kind of pull them out of that state and back into reality or the moment, rather than wherever they happen to be off in their head at that particular time. So anyway, well, why don't I thought we might go through the horse's musculoskeletal system a little bit. When you had done the presentation at the conference, you had gotten into the extensor versus flexor processes of the muscles and groups, and I thought maybe we would look at the spine.
So a process is something that's on a bone, not on a muscle, to start with. But
oh. Brits, you gotta love them. Okay. So,
but yes, we can talk about the flexor and the extensor chain of muscles, if you like. Is that where you're going?
Yes, but I was meaning more as an action verb and not as a physical spot on a bone. But anyway, so what are the 4 sections of spine? And I kind of wanted to specifically talk about maybe some of the expected or potential problems in that area, the weak link in the chain, so to speak, in this spot and this spot and this spot, and maybe how we would counter that, things we would be protective of or would try to incorporate to strengthen this area and so forth. So,
Okay.
um,
Okay. So let me just go back a step and just explain to our listeners what we're talking about when we say a flexor and the extensor chain of muscles. So actually, I'm going to go back a step further still, and I'm just going to explain one of the problems of anatomy. And one of the problems of anatomy is that we as human beings like to break things down into smaller parts so that we can understand them. And there's nothing wrong with that. We need to do that for our learning. So take the muscular system, we can break it down into individual muscles. And with the horse, we're looking at about 700 muscles. We could go further, and we could break those muscles down into component parts of fibers, or bundles of fibers and bundles of fibers. And each of those fibers is surrounded by a structure that we call fascia, which is connective tissue. As I say, surrounding the bundles of fibers, surrounding the bundles of fibers, and surrounding the fibers themselves. Fascia is the same structure as tendons, ligaments, periosteum, which is the membrane around bone as well. But going back to these individual structures, the reality is, and I'm sure at school, actually, you probably learned about antagonist and agonistic muscles and how muscles of opposite action work together in pairs. And the classic example given is the biceps versus the triceps. And when one muscle contracts, the other has to lengthen in order to allow that movement to happen. So we learn about individual structures and that they work together in pairs, and you've got opposite muscles, which is all great. Nice, simple theory. But actually, it's too simplistic because there's no one joint within the horse's body where there's just one muscle to contract it and one muscle to extend it. And in fact, many of these muscles operate more than one joint. And there's many muscles operating more than one joint as well. So it becomes more complicated. So we say, okay, well, let's take it a step further and say that these pairs of muscles work in groups of pairs of muscles. And then, okay, yeah, that works. And then we could look at it from a functional perspective. And we could say that these groups of pairs of muscles work together in chains. And then this is where we get into our flexor versus our extensor chain. So what we're talking about here is the muscles that affect the spine and the hind limb. So we have muscles that are situated above the level of the spine, behind the bony column of the hind limb. These, when I'm doing my painting, I color coordinate. So I've given away my secrets here, but I color coordinate with the painting because I think that it can be useful from a learning perspective. And when you're watching these painted horses move, you can really understand and see that bit more. And I've tried to be as consistent as possible within all my books and within the presentations within the Horses Inside Out Academy. So we have an online learning centre where it's free to join. And once you remember, you can access the free tutorial videos, and you can also pay as you go to webinars, courses, seminars, lecture demonstrations. But within all of this, I've tried to make the painting consistent. So with the extensor chain, these muscles along the top of the back and down the back of the hind limb, I try to always represent them in aquamarine colours. So blue, green, turquoise, purple. And then we have the flexor chain of muscles. These muscles are situated underneath the spine and in front of the bony column of the hind limb. So with those paintings, I would represent those muscles in orange, yellow, and pink. So sort of warmer colours. So the equivalent on us would, of course, the flexor chain is basically all the muscles down the front of our body, including our abdominal muscles, our hip flexors, and the extensor chain would be including our back muscles, our gluteals, our hamstrings down the back of our body. So that's a sort of simplistic way of looking at it. But the flexor and the extensor chain aren't the only chains within the horse's body. We also have chains of muscles that move the forelimbs, that help with protraction, bringing the leg forward, and retraction, bringing the leg backwards. We have muscles that are involved in creating sideways movement, so adduction and abduction. And we could say, well, what about left and right movement? We also could say we've got chains of movement that create those types of movement as well. And then hang on a minute. Are these chains created by us wanting to break down the anatomy so we understand it, or do they actually exist? It's an interesting question, isn't it? But when we think about function, they do exist because it's not that they're just one chain here and one chain there. They are all absolutely connected together. But it comes back to this sort of this idea of breaking things down. And in anatomy, I'll sometimes say a joke where what makes the longissimus dorsi, for example, or any muscle, what makes that an individual muscle as opposed to connected to anything else? Well, the answer is either a scalpel blade, if you're looking at dissection, or vocabulary. It's only us that describes it as an individual muscle that's separate from the rest of the muscular system. And it's the same with the chains. So in reality, all of these 700 muscles are working together. They're all connected together. You can't just look at one part of the horse's body. And it's the same with these chains. And you could say, oh, this is due to fascia. It's all about the fascia. I've got a seminar coming up in September all about fascia. But, because it's all about the fascia that's connecting it in between. But then what about the bones? Because they're holding it all together as well. But we can't look at the bones without looking at the ligaments that are holding that together. And then, well, also, what about the internal organs? And what about the cardiovascular system? Because that could technically be part of the connective tissue as well. So we see that everything truly is connected to one another. And I think this is another thing that we often see, maybe on social media, but people saying, oh, my horse has got a problem in this area. Oh, it could be coming from X, Y, or Z. Or you see a problem in this area, and then experts on Facebook will be saying that there's a specific pattern of what's either causing it or what's going to happen. But the reality is every horse is an individual, and any pain anywhere in the horse's body, any unbalance anywhere in the horse's body, any change in positioning of any structure is going to have a systemic effect. So, sometimes, I'm sure you'll get it, some people say, oh, my horse has got a dental issue on the right-hand side of his, on his cheek teeth on the right-hand side. This means he's going to lean more on the right rein, but he's not leaning on the left rein. I'm sorry, but I think if the horse is in pain, he's just going to be in pain. If you think about, you have tooth pain. If you put a bit in my mouth when I had toothache, I probably would either not lean at all, or I'd lean on both sides, irrelevant of which way I'm going, because that pain isn't just, although it's coming from that area, it's going to affect everything. And I really think that we need to recognize that any pain or any discomfort anywhere can cause a systemic effect on performance, comfort, and welfare. So, I don't know if I've answered your question, but I certainly went off on a tangent, didn't I?
Oh, somewhat. And I did want to ask you, this is not me being snotty because you slapped me on process a minute ago when I was talking about action of systems, just as you just did. But on the horse behind you, you have muscles on the top of the neck painted in red. So is that a deviation from flexor and extensor, or are those, go ahead.
Yes, sure. No, I've actually painted the ligaments in red. So I was trying to, on that particular painting, it's the nuchal and the supraspinous and the interspinous ligament, which you are going to say to me now are not red. You are absolutely correct. They're actually closer to a white, and the nuchal ligament is even more yellow. And the reason for that is because we have different types of collagen fibers, white fibers, and yellow fibers, or otherwise known as collagen and elastin fibers. And it truly is they really do look different in color. But when I'm painting grey horses, the bones are in white. And if I painted the nuchal ligament in a pale yellow, it wouldn't show up very well. So yes, this is an exception here. We're not actually looking at muscles in that painting. That is looking at the ligament, which I will say I have painted in a whole variety of different colours outside of my colour coordination. I think I've even painted it in blue and green before. I just try and pick a colour that I think makes it stand out and is going to be complementary to the skeleton and the colour of the horse.
That pragmatic as always. You got into pain just a minute ago, and I know this will be a little bit of a tangent, but I think this is one of those topics that we oversimplify as well. Would you say that pain diagnostics is easy or difficult, or maybe a better way to think about it, is it outside of the realm of the layman most of the time? How about
I
that?
think it's very difficult.
Yeah.
I think
Uh,
it's very difficult. I think that we're lucky because there's a number of different methods now for recognizing a horse in pain. There's a number of different apps. So there's the recognizing whether your horse is in pain as a scale. I can't remember what the app's called, but like if your horse has got colic and you can recognizing the resting pain face. So that's quite useful. You're going to have to Google that if you want to see it. Then there's Dr. Sue Dyson's ethogram or performance checklist for recognizing the ridden horse in pain, which is fantastic. Vets have got so many different tools at their fingertips, from diagnostic analgesia to using butte testing, that sort of thing. But I think, and then of course there's all the improvement in diagnostics, which can be a challenge because I think we're seeing overdiagnosis of problems when they're not necessarily clinically significant. There seems to be a lot of going back to the erroneous concepts. What is normal? And I think in anatomy, there maybe recently, but we see people have been pointing out anatomical anomalies, and saying, well, this could cause pain. You look at it, I've got the skeletons in my classroom. I've got 3 skeletons. They're all very well, 3 built skeletons and numerous more unbuilt ones. But you look at the bones and the anatomical variation, and it would be easy to say, oh my goodness, this horse, look at the bony changes here, or look at the anatomical anomaly here, this horse must have been in pain. You can't say that from looking at the bones. You can't say that from just looking at an image. So it is very, very difficult. The clinical examination, the assessment of the horse's movement, the assessment of their responses to, and there's a whole load of different tests that we can do. How does the horse respond to different movements, going uphill, going downhill? How does the horse respond to turning in a tight circle? How does the horse respond to standing in a stable and then walking out after it's been in a box all night? And that's another story. Talking about putting horses in on box rest. But I think it is very, very difficult, but it's something that we all need to open our eyes to. And a little bit like you were saying, people not recognizing a horse that's giving off negative signs. You said about the unicorn concept. I think the same thing with horses in pain. We need to do as much as we possibly can to make sure that they are as comfortable as they can be. But like human beings, some of us are a little bit uncomfortable for maybe things we did in our youth. And getting up in the morning is, you're a bit stiff when you first get out of bed than in the afternoon. And that doesn't mean doing nothing is the answer, because I'm pretty sure if you put me on bed rest, the equivalent of, or box rest, for a week, my musculoskeletal health and my musculoskeletal comfort, as never mind my mental health, would be severely affected. And I am a really big believer in using exercise. I call it exercise therapy. We might say prehabilitation, working on your core strength, improving your core muscles, all of your whole of your muscle system, not just your core muscles. That's a really big part of keeping healthy. And I when you asked me earlier, I go swimming 3 times a week. I'm walking the dogs. I do riding the horses. I do also go to either a yoga or a Pilates class as well. And I think it's the variety which is really important. And I really notice in my own body if I'm not doing that stuff. If I was at a conference last week, so I had 2 days of sitting in a conference. Oh, I couldn't wait to move. At the end of those 2 days, I was down. In fact, on the way home, I went for a swim because I just needed to move my body in a different way. And I think sometimes we forget that with a horse, and you think, oh my goodness, he's a little bit stiff and uncomfortable. Give him a rest, put him on box rest. Now, I'm not saying that we need to work lame horses. I don't mean that. What I'm meaning is that we need to recognize that exercise is an important part of keeping our horses healthy and comfortable. The right exercise, the right level, and the right amount of variety for each individual horse. I've even forgotten what the question was. I do this, you ask me a question and I just start talking and then I'm off.
It's perfectly fine. I'm going to go off on another tangent here, but the question was originally about pain and
pain.
diagnosing it. And, yeah, I try to tell people that again, it's part of the unicorn theory, and it's really, to me, a larger picture of people trying to anthropomorphize horses. Even the word humane treatment of horses, humane comes from human. It's a human perspective of what horses should be. I thought it was the same basic principle when you mentioned horses can't be naughty. Naughty is the human perspective, trying to categorize that and make sense of it from what we would do, but from the horse's perspective, his actions are totally different, maybe justified, maybe even subconscious. He doesn't even have a reason for this. It's just his reactive nature and self-protective nature says go left right now. Mm-hmm. But I was going to bring this up and you kind of just did on the anomalies. So your special boy Freddie there, the big gray horse behind you on the poster, you were with him nearly his entire life and thought you knew him inside and out, and then even he had something to teach you unexpected there at the end. So would you go into that a little bit?
Well, he had a few things actually that were surprises, but and this is relating to his skeleton only. One of them was rib fractures. Where did they come from? I wasn't expecting rib fractures. He had some very small fractures in the costal cartilages, which I think is relatively easy to do. A horse kicked them in the side, or rolling, falling over in the field, that sort of thing. And those structures at the end of the ribs, they're really quite small. But he had an old fracture, and the reason I say it was old, and again, when you're looking at a skeleton, you don't know whether the bony changes, or certainly from a fracture, you don't know whether it happened last year or 10 years ago. There's no real way of telling, apart from the fact that he'd had this rib fracture. It hadn't just fractured, it had moved and overlapped and then refused together. So there was a step change in the rib. And the location was what got me, because the location was... just remember whether it was his 8th or his 9th rib, but relatively high up. So it wasn't like on the bit of the rib cage behind the where your leg is when you're riding. It would be just behind the scapula. So it would have been, and those ribs in that area. So your first 8 ribs, when you look at them in cross section, they're almost like thick blades. They're quite chunky. When you get further back, so by the time you get to your 18th rib, they're a different shape in cross section, but they're also much, much smaller. But those ribs further, so progressively from 8, 9, 10, they're quite chunky. Then from 10, it really start to get smaller in diameter. So we're talking about some of the chunkiest, thickest ribs underneath latissimus dorsi, ventral serrate muscle from the shoulder, as well as the cutaneous muscle. So there was quite a lot protecting, and that surprised me. I couldn't think of a time when he would have done that, and I would have thought I would have known. But you just don't know. I mean, there were times when he was lame on his left fore, so maybe that was it. But it's an interesting thing, isn't it? Again, humans can say, I'm in pain, I've got a fractured rib, and we all... Well, I've never fractured a rib, fortunately, but you hear that don't laugh, don't cough, don't sneeze. Those are the things that really hurt, and there's nothing you can do about it. Just let it heal, and that's absolutely fine. We know that with a human. We also know that it would be pretty much the same with the horse, but the difference is they can't tell us I've got a broken rib at the moment. Anyway, the other thing was what was quite interesting was an anomaly at the lumbosacral junction. So the lumbosacral junction is the joint between the last lumbar vertebrae and the first sacral vertebrae. This is a key point within the spine because it's basically a hinge joint, and the amount of flexion and extension there is significant because there's very, very little in the thoracic and the lumbar section, and there's none in the sacrum because those 5 vertebrae are fused together. So you could say, in terms of flexion and extension, it's the points within the spine after the neck and after the tail where there's most flexion and extension. Flexion and extension at this joint is key for, I always say, for the fun stuff, the galloping, the jumping, and the collection in dressage. Basically, it's what allows, because the pelvis is fixed onto the sacrum at the sacroiliac joint, flexion and extension at the lumbosacral junction is what allows the back end to tilt relative to the back. It allows the pelvis to tilt. So each time the horse takes a canter or gallop step and reaches both hind legs underneath the body, the pelvis will tilt. The lumbosacral junction is flexing. And then when the hind legs push out behind, or when he flicks his back end away over a fence, that lumbosacral junction extends. So it's a really key point. And you can find the lumbosacral junction in the live horse by running your fingers along the middle of the back and feeling the tops of the spinous processes. And in the lumbar vertebrae, the spinous processes, these bony projections coming out the top of the vertebrae, are pointing forwards towards the head, and in the sacrum they're pointing backwards. So effectively you can feel a gap at that point. So basically, I said there's been studies done that have shown that about 2/3 of horses have an anomaly in this area. So sometimes the 6 lumbar vertebrae, instead of pointing forwards like the rest of the lumbar vertebrae, is pointing backwards, and it becomes part of the sacrum.
You mean the dorsal process?
Yes.
Of the vertebra? Okay.
Of the vertebrae. So there's a little bit of confusion, or can be a bit of confusion, with that 6 lumbar vertebrae. And the interesting thing with Freddie is his was vertical. So basically, instead of having that very clear lumbosacral junction, his 6th one was undecided as to whether it was going to be orientated like the sacrum or orientated like the lumbar vertebrae. But the thing is, it didn't make any difference to his range of movement. It is just an anomaly. And in human anatomy, they've got books this thick as to what are normal anomalies, findings, for example, with X-rays. So it's a normal anomaly that we know exists, but doesn't necessarily mean that there's any clinical, significance with that. But it is a variation from the norm. And the interesting thing is, I'd felt his lumbosacral junction loads of times, and it was very easy to feel on Freddie. I never suspected that he had this sort of double. So sometimes when that happens with these horses, they get extra movement between L5 and L6, as well as between L6 and S1 in the sacrum. So they almost like have a double joint, a double hinge joint at that point. But it's, absolutely fascinating. Didn't know it was there.
So it may have been a different horse in your presentation, but and I guess just to define the lumbar vertebra look weird. They're a little bit like an airplane. They have transverse processes as well that are kind of like the wings of an airplane. So I think you had a horse that had something in the rib transverse process junction, had an extra rib or a part. Was that Freddie, or that was a different?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's really, Freddie also had a slight variation there. So basically, the spine is separated into 5 different sections. So you've got cervical, thoracic, lumbar, sacral, and then your tail, caudal, or coccygeal vertebrae. And again, in anatomy, it's human beings that are saying these are different sections. But when we look at the anatomy, they are different shapes. There's a different amount of movement in each of those different sections. And you tend to see quite a lot of anomalies at these junctions. So at the cervicothoracic, at the thoracolumbar, at the lumbosacral, and at the sacrocaudal, because I think there's probably a little bit more opportunity for variation. And I've seen a lot of horses have variations between the last rib and the lumbar transverse process, because like you say, that the lumbar vertebrae have these wings coming out the side. They're actually the evolutionary remains of ribs. So in some ways, it kind of makes sense that sometimes the last rib is fixed onto the thoracic vertebrae, a little bit like the lumbar transverse process. And sometimes a transverse process may articulate with a lumbar vertebrae a little bit like a rib. And sometimes you have transverse processes that are shaped like a rib, and sometimes you have the last rib is shaped like a transverse process. So you get these slight variations. The thing is with that is if you get a variation on the left side but not the right side, could that potentially mean the horse is better at bending in one direction than the other direction? Yes, it could. But it doesn't necessarily mean the horse is going to be lame because of it.
You mentioned earlier about varying degrees of movement. So obviously the cervical spine and the neck has the most movement amongst or between the joints, and then the thoracic has less than that, but still some movement. The lumbar has only like a degree of movement between the vertebra, and then the sacral is completely fused, no movement whatsoever. I just want to run this by you. This is how I have kind of categorized that and describe it. And just as the naughty pony thing, we have our shortcomings of our descriptions, but I just wanted to see if this sounded fair to you. I kind of view the horse's body almost like a whip. So you've got the sacral would be the handle, the stiff part, and then we're going to try to transmit energy throughout that whip. And if you look at any whip, the part of the whip, I make whips, it's called the belly. It's right from the handle. It's going to be thicker and stiffer, and then the whip will taper and get more and more flexible as it goes toward the end that actually does the popping. And one of the things that I hear too often in my mind is that the lumbar has no movement in it. And while it has very little movement in it, to me, it's some of the most important movement in the horse, because if we viewed the hind end like the engine, the lumbar area or the loin of the horse is the transmission. It's what takes all that power and brings it forward throughout, allows elevation and so forth. So is that a fair characterization in your mind, or would you have something to add or subtract from that, or what?
I would say just be careful being a little bit too simplistic about your bending. And it's interesting what you say about the like having the handle as the stiff part, because a lot of the early studies done on movement within the back, what they did was they fixed the back of the sacrum and then bent it forward from that point and measured how much movement there was in front of that point. So I can see exactly what you mean. The reason I say be careful about being too simplistic is because you've said it's stiff at the handle, at the sacrum, and then it progressively gets more bendy as we get further forward, which isn't quite true, because the cranial thoracic portion of the spine, in other words, the first 8, or you could say from the 2nd to the 8th, 9th thoracic vertebrae, there's very, very little movement there, because a little bit like your sacrum and your lumbar vertebrae being really important for the transfer of energy. And I think you're right saying about it, that section is really important, but no movement or little movement doesn't mean we're not talking about importance. Something can have very little movement and still being incredibly important. Take the sacroiliac joint, for example. It is not designed to move. Yes, okay, there's a tiny bit there for shock absorption, but it's not designed to move. That doesn't mean it's not important. So I think if you then think about this cranial thoracic region, why is there virtually no movement in that section? Okay, yes, you could talk about the shape of the vertebrae, the first 8 ribs creating a cage to the sternum with a direct attachment there. And that cage protects the heart and, yes, the front of the lungs. But, that's really important that it's kept still. But it's also important that it's still because the forelimbs are on either side. So it needs to have stability in that point there. So with your whip analogy, what I'd say is if you could somehow make it stiffer again at the area of the cranial thoracic, then you're something like. And I think fundamentally, we talk about, some of the old anatomy books talk about, or training books talk about, the horse should bend evenly from poll to tail. We know anatomically this is not possible. And one of my big things in my training that I try to get across is that if we want our horses to be healthy, and movement is a key part of being healthy, we need to encourage our horses to use a full range of movement in all of their joints on a regular basis. If we want to encourage them to do that, we need to know what normal is. We need to know what anatomical normal is. Once we know what normal is, then we can discover which exercises, which movements encourage that movement, and we can use them for both assessment and encouraging the horse to use that movement. So that's a really, really important part of the training, and something that we talk about a lot in the Horses Inside Out Academy. I think there was two parts to the question though, wasn't there? There was the whip bit. What was the second bit?
The transmission of power through the loin and so forth. And I would say even when you're getting toward that section of the thoracic, that's also for weight bearing. Like you say, the ribs are different right there. They're much heavier and thicker and so forth. And then they would be protected behind the shoulder blade, which is not going to allow them to flex that direction and all anyway. So that almost we could think of as the end. I very often think of the head as kind of the hood ornament. I think we focus way too much on head position and so forth at times. There are a tremendous, maybe even the majority of people that I come across think that collection is mostly vertical flexion. And I don't think those two things are as related as people tend to think that they are. Well,
I think you've alluded to a couple of misconceptions there that people have about anatomy, and one of them is that the lumbar vertebrae, there's a lot of movement in that region, and you hear trainers say, oh, you've changed the head and neck position, look how much more he's moving behind the saddle. And people say, but I can see when a horse is working in a long and low outline, he's moving more in the lumbar region compared to when he's in a advanced collected outline. They're not necessarily seeing vertebral movement. And I think this is the important thing. The illusion of movement, it's not an illusion. There is movement happening, but it's not coming from, movement between the vertebrae. Because we've got the gluteal tongue, the gluteal extends over the top of the pelvis and into that lumbar region. What you're actually seeing is the muscles moving more, and that they're free to move more, which is a great thing. But it's not actually lumbar vertebral movement. And I think about the outline. So often we hear that how do you judge an outline, or correct outline should be the poll at the highest point and nose on the vertical. For me, that takes the focus to the head, and I would prefer people look at the underside of the horse's neck. They look at the position of the neck, because we see an S shape within the cervical vertebrae, and that gives the neck an extra range of movement. So we already have flexion and extension, lateral flexion and rotation, but the S shape collectively means that the horse has got the ability to shorten the neck by flexing more at the top and extending more at the bottom, and elongate, which we see when a horse is galloping, for example. That's flexion at the bottom of the neck and extension at the top of the neck to effectively straighten out the curves, which means the neck can shorten and lengthen like a telescope. So we can combine those movements together and the neck becomes much more complicated. But actually, I think what we want to be watching out for good posture is the base of the neck should be able to come up and back. So when I'm assessing an outline, I'm not so interested in where the nose is or where the poll is. What I'm interested in is the shape underneath the neck, the shape of the base of the neck. And I've got some great videos in the free tutorial channel in the Horses Inside Out Academy. We've also got a presentation all about the horse's neck called Understanding Your Horse's Neck, where we talk about posture, how to assess it, how to improve it. Because, we put the bit in the horse's mouth and you I want to say pull the bit, pull on the bit, and it's automatically going to cause movement at a joint where there's a lot of movement, which is that very first one at the top of the head. So the horse is going to tuck the nose in, but that doesn't, that's equivalent of giving me a double chin. That doesn't mean it's affecting the rest of the horse's body. In many ways, we need the bit to be at the bottom of the neck. There you go. There's a new bit for you to invent. A bit to go at the bottom of the neck that pulls the base of the neck up and back. That would be really good. And I'm sort of joking here when I'm saying that about putting a bit there. But the point is that I think we're looking in the wrong area. I recently did an article actually all about U's and V's and the upside down U shape or the upside down V shape underneath the horse's neck, and how to assess neck outline, which is we have we publish articles once a week on the Horses Inside Out website, so anyone can view them. But if you're interested in that topic, do check out the article all about head and neck outline.
Well, very good. I think it's about time that we pay the bills and little homage to our sponsor for this particular episode. And Gillian, I always try to find a sponsor that complements the guest that we've got on. So with a tip of the hat to your painting, our sponsor for this episode is Bare Bones Equine Paint. Have you ever wanted to win the costume contest? Do you want to draw on your horse like a canvas? The latest of cutting-edge products for horses out of Beijing, Bare Bones Equine Paint, is for you. We've got the key to every other country's patent office, so you know the world's best technology is in our paints. Piracy hasn't been only for the seas for decades now, and you can instill some of that good Chinese look to your horse as well. From the organs to the muscles, we have the colors to help you apply the structures and become as wise as Confucius. See the whole horse moving in front of you. Many people today are worried about the pollution and its effects on our environment. Harmful X-rays can cause damage to the sensitive skin, so we've brought back some of our former processes and added in some PB to the paint and to help protect from harmful rays of the sun. I'm reading this for the first time right now. Our scientists in Wuhan assure us that the lead helps to keep lead PB. They have lead in the paint that helps to create heterosis and genetic diversity. With our nanotechnology, these particles can enter the skin and bloodstream to help protect the whole horse. We've even tested it on many children in our. Okay, we're not going to be accepting the money from this sponsor. I think we're going to bail out of this right now. We're going to give that to a good charity or something. So I apologize for that. Gillian, I didn't know that was what I was getting into. I totally throwing my wife under the bus here. She vetted that one. Whew. All right, that was a close call. So, all right, Bare Bones Equine Paint. Y'all might watch out for that one. Okay. So you kind of were just getting into the thoracic sling, which is sort of one of those buzzwords that flies around the equine world right there with the lifting of the base of the neck. And I know the pole is obviously one of those places where we will very commonly find tension or pain in a horse, but that junction at the base of the neck where the cervical spine meets the thoracic spine, Jim says that's another one of those spots that almost every horse gets sore in. So would you give us some of your thoughts on that, or maybe some exercises that we could put into play to help a horse strengthen their balance or whatever we need to do to help mitigate, heal, or prevent?
Yeah. I think the reason that we see issues in and around that area is because horses that are ridden with a poor posture, very often the thorax will move forward and down between the front legs. And if that happens, it's going to be associated with extension of the base of the neck, which, if we were sitting here like this and you collapse forward, and you can feel it sometimes the end of a day when you've been sitting at your computer all day, you can feel yourself just doing that and collapsing through the neck. That is the equivalent of this neck position that I'm talking about in the horse. But we also see extension in the back associated with a forward and down position of the thorax. So which comes first? It's a chicken and egg situation, but yeah, absolutely. A forward and down position at the base of the neck, or forward and down thoracic position, is going to put more strain on the cervicothoracic junction and the caudal neck vertebrae, as well as into the mid-thoracic region and in the lumbosacral junction, and then all the way down the hind leg as well, because that hind limb positioning is going to change, and it's going to affect the forelimb movement. Anyway, I'm digressing. One of the great ways to improve thoracic sling tone, because I think this is key, get your horse fit. Make sure that your horse is truly fit, because fitness is, and I think I would say the same thing for the muscles that support the rib cage. I think we see a lot of horses that are not fit enough. And you might hear a horse owner say, "Oh, I only walk my horse down the road at the weekend. We just go for a little hack once a week." He doesn't need to be cardiovascularly fit to be able to do that job. Well, if you want your horse to last a long time and be able to perform well. And again, the word performance doesn't just refer to the dressage, the mark you'll get in a dressage test. Performance isn't just about competition. Performing well on a hack is moving actively, swinging comfortably through the body, working in good posture, the rider sitting symmetrically, because that is important for that horse. Good performance in whatever a horse does, whatever the discipline, and whatever we do, it's massively important. So fitness is something that I think is often overlooked, particularly in the in the pleasure horse industry, because people think it doesn't matter, because they don't have to gallop round badminton, they don't have to have the fitness for the performance. But actually, if the horse is worth it, it would improve the posture. So fit horses, a bit like fit people, will naturally have better posture, because their breathing muscles, for one, are going to be stronger. Their core, all of their muscles are going to be that little bit stronger and going to better help to support their body than somebody that's just slouching on the couch all day. They're going to have a difference in the musculoskeletal system. So that is a really simple thing. Another example is, the abdominal muscles. If your horse has got long, weak abdominal muscles, one of the simplest ways to improve it, do more canter. Cantering will tone the abdominal muscles in a way that walk and trot just doesn't. It also tones the thoracic sling muscles, because the horse rocks from forehand to hindquarters in a way that we don't see in walk and trot. So canter is a superb exercise for toning the abdominal muscles, toning the thoracic sling. And yes, okay, we could take it a bit further and we could start saying, well, what about doing lines of canter poles or raised canter poles? That's further going to increase the demand on those structures. But for a lot of horses that are unfit, that would be too much anyway. And there are lots of very simple exercises, unridden exercises that we can do, in-hand exercises such as walk pole, slalom. There's a wither rock. The wither rock is available in the Horses Inside Out Academy. So in the academy, as I said before, it's free to join. And then once you're a member, you get access to the free tutorial video channel. And in there, I try to put videos demonstrating different exercises, explaining the benefits of each of them, as well as sort of juicy stuff. So that's worth accessing and having a look at that. But yeah, there's so much you can do to strengthen it. But I think for a healthy body, it's important to remember, yes, you need to have supple, loose muscles. So we think about yoga or stretching exercises. But actually, we also need to have strength as well, and strength and stability. We need to balance the strength and stability with flexibility and suppleness. So we need both movement and we need strength to support it. So those things are important factors to bring into a training program. What part of what I do now is I see a lot of horses for postural assessments and movement assessments. People bring their horses to me, and we do a full movement assessment, and postural assessment, range of movement tests, and then at the end of it, discuss a plan going forward, what this horse needs in terms of exercise therapy, whether they be exercises in the stable, in hand, or ridden, and really come up with a plan going forward of what needs to be included in their mix of exercise therapy. And I say exercise therapy because I think rather than just saying, riding the horse, we need to be thinking about what we do with our horse is going to affect them long term. It will affect their longevity. It's going to affect their comfort into their old age. So we need to get it right from the start. So
this wasn't something that I really planned on asking you, but this was a question that came up in my Facebook group, Bits, Spurs, and Good Sense, recently, and I feel like it ties in really well. What you were talking about, the neck's ability to extend or retract, I call turtling, and I think turtling, when they're kind of pulling the head back into the shoulders and all, and they're shortening the neck, that's one of those things that I think often gets conflated with collection and really isn't what collection is, or isn't in the real deal of collection. Would you mind talking, like, this is what I'm trying to lead you into, is the lack of a collarbone and the thoracic sling and the way that works. Because I don't think many people they hear the term thoracic sling, but they don't really know what it means and just how independent the thoracic cavity is from the shoulders. For the example I always give is if you had a pocket knife with a 3-inch blade, you can cut the shoulders completely off of a horse. They literally are just hanging between the two shoulders there, and kind of that's that muscular system and all that you're trying to tone. Am I making any sense here to you at all? You understand what I'm getting at?
Basically, it's saying that the thoracic sling muscles are what connect you could say connect the forelimb to the thorax, but I think it's actually the other way around. In movement, this is a dynamic thing. The thorax is suspended between the two pillars of the front limb, not by bone, but by a sling of muscles. And I've got a presentation all about the thoracic sling muscles called the thoracic sling muscles, and what is it, strengthening? I can't quite remember, but it's in the Horses Inside Out Academy. And I've painted I was quite proud of this painting because I painted the thoracic sling muscles in a way that they can be viewed both from the side and from in front and still be anatomically accurate. So I was quite proud of that. And yeah, the thoracic sling muscles, the serratus muscle, so they're made up of the ventral serrate muscle, both the cervical and the thoracic portion, most of the pectoral muscles as well. But these muscles, there's a lot of fibers. They're quite fibrous, so they're not super stretchy. They can't be, if you think about it. If they were super stretchy, the thorax would be down by the horse's knees and back up again, and it would take a huge amount of muscular strength just to hold the thorax up between the front legs, because that's a huge weight there. So there's a lot of fibrous tissue within these muscles that helps to hold the thorax there with minimum muscular effort. So in a way, you could think of them as, when you think about the stretch and recoil model of your thoracic of an elastic band, these are really thick elastic bands that take quite a lot of force to stretch. But of course, when you do stretch them, they really do contribute to movement. But it's incredible. I think another misconception with anatomy, yes, is about, does the horse have a collarbone? I think most people know that the horse doesn't have a collarbone these days, but it's this idea of the continuation of the structures underneath the shoulder blade. So again, we often learn in anatomy about the structures of the head, the structures of the neck, and compartments, the forelimb, the spine, the back, or whatever. So longissimus dorsi, a muscle right underneath where we sit. And then because the shoulder's over the top of it, I think very often people think that the longissimus dorsi must stop somewhere just behind the shoulder. It doesn't. It carries on in between the two shoulder blades all the way forward through to the fourth cervical vertebrae. It's not just longissimus dorsi, but iliocostalis, some of the abdominal muscles. These structures, and when we look at going back to the myofascial chains we were talking about earlier, they're carrying on underneath the forelimbs. And this continuous nature, I just think is incredible. It's really interesting to try and look at the horse from a different perspective, and it helps us to improve the way we ride and train fundamentally.
So the specific, yes, ma'am. No,
that's your question.
That's a perfect background. So the specific question that we had in the group was about the use of tie downs, or what the English world would call the standing martingale. And the English world, when they put this on, it tends to be adjusted longer than the roper with the tie down on. And I have always felt like this is probably one of the more damaging pieces of equipment that we put on a horse. I am just wholeheartedly against them. And I feel like, as we have this, I know on the podcast people won't see this, but the ones on YouTube will see this anatomy in action poster behind you on the wall, and we've got the horse in the very last frame with a full extension where that S shape is taken out, and we have pretty much a straight cervical spine at that point. And
that's not even a big fence. He's just He's just cantering over a raised pole in that. And you can see how much movement there is in the neck. Absolutely.
And then we put this device on there that keeps the horse from being able to perform that extension. And we overdevelop these muscles at the base of the neck. And just as you were giving the example of the horse dumping their chest down at the base and all of that stuff. So do you hate a tie down as much as I do, or do you find there to be a useful purpose or a way it can be used?
Yeah, I avoid any and all training aid that forces a horse into a position or restricts a range of movement.
Would you extend that to things like sidelines as well and stuff like that?
Do you know what? The only training aid that I love and use is poles. It goes back to the beginning. Personally, I think you can do so much using poles. I know that a lot of people, when they're starting a horse, they may put them in side reins for them to get used to the idea of a rein contact. I think that could be useful, and I think that could be acceptable. But I'm not talking about strapping the head and neck so it's into a fixed outline, and that I really do not agree with. And going back to what you're saying about the standing martingale, and I think we could see a similar thing with any training aid that stops the horse lifting their head up. I mean, if you're wanting to jump big fences, if you're wanting to jump solid fences going eventing, then any kind of piece of equipment that restricts range of movement is frankly going to be dangerous, because the head and neck is like the fifth leg in terms of they need to use the head and neck positioning for balance, for movement. And if a horse gets close to a fence, they'll very often throw their head down to enable them. There's connections in anatomy, or in biomechanics, I should say. There's like a learned reflex that connects head and neck movement with forelimb movement. So if the horse throws the head down, lifts the base of the neck up, this is related to shoulder and elbow flexion. And if they extend, so if you extend the base of the neck, it's related to extension. Now, a lot of the time people are trying to avoid extension of the neck and avoid forelimb extension. But if you're jumping a fence, sometimes they need to get forelimb extension to help them land from a fence, to stop themselves falling over. So they very often will use quite dramatic movements. If you look at the horses, wild or cantering around in the field or play fighting with each other, they'll often use dramatic head and neck movements to help get the limbs moving. So I think there's a safety element, first of all. Secondly, I'm going to talk about types of muscle contraction. So if you've ever had an injury, maybe you've dislocated a shoulder or something like that, and you don't have maybe full range of movement in your shoulder, but the physio will give you what we call isometric exercises, which involve say keeping your shoulder in one position but maybe pushing your hand up and out and down, if you can see on my video. But so basically you're strengthening the muscles involved in moving the shoulder without moving the shoulder itself. If you strap a horse's head down and they resist it, so let's just pretend my head's strapped down by whatever device you choose, and I try and lift my head up, I'm strengthening the muscles, part of my extensor chain, through resistance. So then you take that away, the horse is actually going to be better at creating that movement that you don't want. So not only do I think it's not a good thing, and we could go into the psychological element as well, but actually from a training perspective, if you're trying to stop your horse lifting its head up by continually strapping the horse's head down and stopping that movement, the horse will be bracing against that and strengthening the muscles that enable him to do it, rather than the other way around. I'm not suggesting we strap our horse's head up to do the inverse reaction, but I think it's interesting what you can tell if a horse has been worked in draw reins, and I'm sure it's the same with what you're talking about, these tight standing martingales. You can tell by how they move their head and necks. It's interesting. It always comes back to anatomy, and I think shortcuts. There's no such thing as a shortcut in life. I think you get to a certain age. I'm not just talking about training horses, but certainly training horses. There are no shortcuts. You have to put the time in and the effort in correctly. the repetition for learning is really important. And in terms of the training of the musculoskeletal system, the time and correct repetitions is really, really important.
One of the things that I always like to begin talking about in my bit presentations is the horse's eye and how it works. And the reason that I try to do that is that I feel like we see an awful lot of training these days that and the person doing the training may not even realize this, but what they are doing is submission through blindness. A horse really has to be able to, because of the anatomy of the eye, they focus different distances by tilting of the chin. And so when we pull their head down into a particular posture, like the vertical or behind the vertical, we have really shortened the area in which the horse can see, which is, if we're doing a dressage test in a manicured arena, then they can be on the vertical and they can see about 25 feet ahead, and that's a stride for a canter. And so they're good. But if you're in a pasture with uneven surfaces, rocks, holes, muds, up, down, and so forth, and you have a horse restricted in a pasture like that, you have really taken away their ability to see what's coming and adjust to it and so forth. And I feel like people should understand that if I'm going to do something in rough country, I don't want to be riding a horse that can't see where to put his feet. I want him to have freedom of focusing where he needs to focus.
Absolutely.
Also brings me to, we talked about anatomical anomalies. When I started delving more into that, I happened to be working with a particular horse, and I was doing some positive reinforcement training with this horse. He was a problem horse, pretty bronky, and very, very mistrustful of people. And when I got into the hand feeding part to reward him, he was always putting his head in a very odd posture to receive the treat, and he would have a difficult time finding my hand, like way harder than most horses. And what I eventually figured out, or what I suspect, is that this particular horse was nearsighted. The way his eye worked wasn't the way most horses' eyes work, and he needed to be in a different head position to see things off by 10 or 15 degrees of what the average horse needed to be. And I started watching him in the pasture, and even in the pasture, like he would be completely free and loose, and he would still be near the vertical, where most horses would have been nose out 20 degrees or something like that, doing the same activity that he was doing. So there's just a little weird thing for you there, but made me start to consider them as individuals more than I typically was prior to that, I guess. Yeah. So anyway, so while I've then brought up the vertical and behind the vertical, this is one of my real pet peeves. Like, if my life's work would extinguish riding behind the vertical at all, I would be good with that. I see so many aspects of it that are harmful to the horse. So do you have similar feelings there, or would you share some of, from the anatomy side, the things that is a problem there? I'm looking at it more from the mouth, the tongue, and the throat, and the bitting stuff, and it's incredibly harmful to all of that, the way that it works. But from your perspective, what does behind the vertical look like?
Yeah, so I think I've already said about the U's and the V's, and that is, we said earlier, didn't we, about the head and neck position, and how pulling on the base of the neck, pulling on the bit is basically causing flexion at that first cervical joint, and that compresses the structures on the underside of the neck on the underside there. And I talk about U's, upside down U's and V's in this article, and in the webinar all about the horse's neck, and I really would suggest that anyone interested go and watch that. But I think we can all agree that going behind the vertical is bad. Great, okay, we've done that, but I think what we then need to say is, okay, instead of focusing on the negative stuff, what should we be focusing on? What's the alternative? So I always like to spin things round into a positive and give something for people to go away with that they can focus on. So instead of focus on not doing something, they should focus on doing something. And I think for me, it's the connection of the back end and into the back. So the movement of that area, the posture of that area. So you'll sometimes hear people saying, like a trainer, forget about the front end, focus on the back end. And that is really, really important in terms of propulsion. But I'm not saying we should forget about the front end altogether, because in terms of the forelimbs, proprioception and balance, and when we say proprioception, we're talking about spatial awareness. And if you're trying to train your horse, just sending them forwards and forwards and forwards isn't, necessarily the ideal thing. We don't just want really, really fast moving, forward moving horses. So working on proprioception exercises, probably again with poles. There's so much we can do with poles to help with this. That is all going to contribute to the correct positioning of the neck. And for me, getting the base of the neck to come up and back is what it should all be about. So yes, I think there is a place to say nobody should be behind the vertical, but what's the alternative? How do we get to that point of training and riding? And I think a lot of the time we're not spending long enough on the basics. And like I said earlier, there's no shortcuts, unfortunately, in life and with training horses. And actually spending the time to work on your horse's posture, to work on your horse's conditioning, fitness, and the basic training elements is just so important. And I don't think there's anything that can replace that. If we can get all the basics right, the base of the neck should be up and back. The thorax will be up and back between the front legs. The back will be in a good posture. And the nose won't go behind the vertical, doesn't need to go behind the vertical, because everything else is right. I think the position, to be honest, then if everything else is right, the position of the nose almost becomes irrelevant. And so I don't mean to say, it's not important, because it absolutely is important. But I think we're in a slight danger within the equine world. And this is something else that worries me, that everyone on the internet saying how bad it is that we're doing this and how bad it is that we're doing that. And oh my goodness, look at this person. They're doing something terrible with their horse. Very often they don't mean to be. They're doing the best that they can. But I think we want to be careful to look at the positives and suggest ways forward, rather than just saying, this is a bad example and here's another bad example. Because what message does that send to the non-equine world? There are a lot of good things within horse sport. And you think about, going back to the anatomy, horses are such incredible athletes. Every single horse can jump a fence bigger than I can. We've got a little 12-2 pony that jumps the 5-bar gate to get into the paddock, with ease. And you look at the spleen, for example, that has an ability to let extra red blood cells into the circulatory system to allow them to go for longer distances. So thinking about your endurance horses and your race horses, the physical strength and carrying ability of the horse is incredible. So there's so many positive things. And I think, it's that balance, isn't it? We want the best for our horses, and we want to eradicate all bad practices. And in many ways, I think that they should introduce bans for anybody that's that is not recognizing welfare issues. I think we all need to have the confidence to stand up and say that's not right. But I think we also need to celebrate what's good within the equine industry.
I can agree with that on all points. The one thing I might disagree with a little bit is I'm not sure that we all agree that behind the vertical is a bad thing. I still see
the majority of it.
Yeah. Like for instance, there was a study done, which I guess is just confirmation. The reality of this was rather obvious, but where dressage judges heavily rewarded and preferred horses behind the vertical, even, today.
No, I think that's something that's got to change. I really do think that. Okay, and I will.
In the reining world, in the Western end, like the horses you're talking about they're low in the front end at the base of the neck and behind the vertical, like that's the standard. You will not see the exception, the horse that's elevated in the thoracic sling, which is an unmistakable feeling as a rider. If you've ridden a horse that is elevated in the thoracic sling and they're lifting in the chest and the base of the neck, like once you feel that should be what you want to feel in every single horse you ride thereafter. Like it should obviously be right. And yet we do have some groups that are riding contrary to that still. So
No, I think you're right. And I think that's something that's really got to change. I like to think that the tide is changing and that it is going to improve. And when I say we know that it's who is we? That's a good question.
a couple of things that I wanted to get into with you. We did breach the extensor and the flexor systems and the balance, and now we kind of talked about base of the neck and the effect of tie downs. So what do you see, or would you say that as a contributing factor to lameness or unsoundness, is that unbalanced condition often a contributing factor? So in other words, we have this set of muscles is extremely strong, and the opposing set of muscles, which again is an oversimplification, that should balance that out, is extremely weak. And so we're out of balance in that manner. Do you see that commonly as a contributing factor or
Yes.
part of the situation?
Yes. I could carry it, but let me go further. So I think what we need to understand is the definition of posture. So good posture is when forces are evenly distributed around the body during movement. And then another question we need to understand is what is the most common cause of injury with horses? Do you know what the most common cause of injury with horses would be? And when I'm saying horse, I'm not referring to a kick in the field. Performance-related injuries. Do you know?
What would it be? No, ma'am. What would it be?
Repetitive strain injury. So most injuries are going to be caused by repetitive strain injury. So then, and I don't know what it's like in America, but if someone said, oh yes, the vet's told me that my horse has had this tendon injury or this muscle tear or this bony changes in this joint due to repetitive strain injury, you can imagine other people saying, oh, that's because she did too much shouldering on the left rein. She's been practicing that dressage test over and over and over again, and she's not been doing anything different. Or she's been working that horse too much on that surface or on that rein, or she's been doing too much of this and not enough of that. Whereas in reality, and I'm not saying that variety isn't important, variety is massively important. We want to have to encourage our horses to use a full range of movement in all of our joints, on all of their joints on a regular basis. And if you're only using a small range of movements repeatedly and only doing that movement, and the horse doesn't have opportunity for other, then of course it's going to lead to injuries. But there's another factor, and that is posture. And I said that good posture is when we have even distribution of forces. You could also say the same thing about symmetry. So symmetry within the body is going to lead to even forces being distributed around the body. So if you have poor posture or asymmetry, then this very often will lead to some structures being longer, some structures being shorter, some structures being taut, some structures being loose. In movement, some structures getting more force, some structures getting less force. And the thing is, you can get that with asymmetrical conformation as well as poor posture, combine the whole lot. And you can find that some structures are going to get more stress going through them because of their posture, because of their conformation. You add onto a horse with poor posture, an unfit horse with poor posture, put a rider on and ask it to perform, those structures are going to get even more stress. So it doesn't matter whether you ride on sand, whether you go out for hacks up and down through woods on up and down hills, whether you do dressage, show jumping, pole work, in-hand work. It doesn't matter what you do if that asymmetry and uneven distribution of force is happening within the horse's body. Because whatever gait, walk, trot, canter, those asymmetrical forces are going to be happening, increasing the risk of injury. So it comes back to what I was saying. I'm really passionate about this, that we need to take responsibilities for our horse's posture, our horse's fitness, our horse's musculoskeletal condition. That is really, really important. And I say we, and I really am referring to the horse owner, the number one rider, whoever's response. It's not the vet's responsibility. It's not the therapist's responsibility. It's not the farrier. It's not your nutritionist. It's not your coach. You employ, you get those people. You've got to get the right team. You've got to have the right professionals around you to help. I'm not saying they're not important. They're massively important in helping you, but fundamentally you're the one. So you that's responsible for your horse. So you need to learn a little bit about each of their areas to know if they're good, so to speak. But yeah, so I've forgotten what the question was now, but basically, yes, I do think, oh yes, it's coming back to me, that an imbalance, poor posture can lead to injury. There's no doubt about it. Yeah, we see an extended back posture, which is probably one of the most common poor extension in the back is one of the most common poor postures we see within the horse's back. And it makes sense if you think about the effect of gravity over time. A young horse's back is always going to get more extended as he gets older, the weight of the digestive system pulling down on the horse's back. But that extended back posture is the cause or the root of many muscular, ligamentary and osteoarthritic problems that we see within the horse's back. It's the reason why we see kissing spine in that mid-thoracic to caudal thoracic region so commonly, especially as the horses get older. It's the reason why we see many movement and performance-related issues as well. It links into the position of the thorax, the position of the base of the neck, position of the pelvis. It affects the hind limb, the forelimb, the head. So it's absolutely all connected, and for me, posture is just so important. We need to get the posture right at the beginning and throughout the horse's life.
This will be a little bit of a shifting of gears, but it was a point I definitely wanted to hit on, and something I really appreciated seeing you point out and encourage in the demonstration that you did at Stowe on the Wold there. And that was one of the horses went through the ground poles that you set up with relative ease, and one of the horses was having a pretty good bit of trouble going through there and staying balanced, and that horse was the overdeveloped in the front end, having trouble in the thoracic sling and all of those things. And you said out loud to the lady that was handling him to let him just walk through and go very slow and kind of pick his way through. And I loved that you did that. That doesn't have to be a trotting exercise, and you were allowing that horse to pick his way through and find his balance, become more aware of what his feet are and all of those things. And it may be because I've gotten older, fatter, lazier, I don't know, but I have a far greater appreciation for slow work now than I ever would have had when I was in my 20s or something like that. I do a lot more work at the walk and so forth. So would you talk a little bit about that?
Walk poles. So I love canter for toning the abdominal muscles, but you cannot do enough walk. Walk is just a fantastic gait for so many reasons. I've got a whole webinar all about the biomechanics of walk, assessing walk, improving walk, and using it, because I think, anything we do, we need to be doing 20 minutes of walk work as a warm-up before we start. But if you're wanting to rehab, if you've got back issue, or if your horse has got back issues, it's a slow gait. It's got low impact, slow movement. So movement is created by muscle contraction and purposeful joint movement rather than stretch and recoil, which is a little bit more unpredictable and less conscious that we see when you add a moment of suspension. But slowing down through the walk poles. If you were to walk through the woods and you were to walk over, you got to a high obstacle, you don't speed up to walk over it. You actually slow down. That step going over, you give yourself time. The tempo slows down significantly. And I don't know whether it's because we're all taught to be active and keep the horse forward and ride forward when you're going to a jump, but literally nearly every person that either rides or leads a horse through walk poles is trying to make them go quicker. Whether they're riding, you see that the horse taps the pole and the rider straightway's got their log on and they're pressurizing the horse. Or if they're leading, they're pulling them to keep them going faster. I seem to say it an awful lot, and that is let go. Let go of the reins. So you say to a rider, hold on to the buckle. Just let go of your reins really hard. And then the trick that they do is they hold onto the buckle, but they hold it really high, so they've still got contact. I'm like, no, hold onto the buckle and put your hand down and forward. So you've really got no contact. Take your leg off and just focus on looking up. Again, it's good to give a positive thing to focus on. I always think if you say to somebody, don't do this, it's like saying, don't think of a pink elephant. You think of a pink elephant. So instead, say, focus on holding the buckle forward and down, looking up and letting your seat follow the movement. And then the horse has got time to do it. And the same leading. Give the horse a nice loopy rope and let them pick their way through, because actually by giving them more time, they've got time to lift their legs up. If they've got time to lift their legs up, they're going to get more flexion in the joints. You're going to get the core muscles recruiting. You're getting the lateral stabilizer muscles recruiting. You're going to get an increased amount of movement. And we haven't spoken about if you don't use it, you lose it. But thinking about that principle, walk is a great way of encouraging the horse to use rotation and lateral flexion in the back. But you've got to give them time. If you rush them through, they're not going to be able to lift their legs up as high. The step is going to be flattened. The back will hollow. And the other thing I would say about walk poles is get your distance right, because so often people put the distances too long. And I've seen vets do it. I've seen high level trainers. It's funny. I've been talking about using a series of walk poles for years, and I'm still seeing that people just don't use them. And I'm like, it's so simple, so beneficial. We have we've got some telegraph poles which we've put on blocks so they don't roll, and we've got a series of 6 of them going out into the backfield just there. We've got another series going out into the front field. We've got a series we've got a little sort of warm-up arena. So we've got like series of these poles so that the horse can be walking over them to and from the way to the arena, to and from the way to the field. They really they're absolutely fantastic, and I just wish people could use them more and see the benefit of them, because the other thing is they're so easy to do. Once you've got them set up, it's an easy way of improving and stimulating your horse's posture and core muscles, lateral stabilizer muscles. And I think the same thing about backing up. If I was to pick, if you said to me, pick 2 exercises, you're only allowed 2 in-hand exercises, it would be walking over raised poles or logs. And logs are great because they look, the horse recognizes them as something solid. Walking over raised poles and backing up. Long marching steps backwards with the head down. And there's so many benefits from flexing at the lumbosacral junction, strengthening the muscles involved in collection, elevating the forehand, increasing rotation and lateral flexion through the back, strengthening the muscles that help to support good posture when carrying the weight of the rider. It's a fabulous exercise, and it's low impact. It's going to put less stress through the body than trotting or cantering. So again, something easy to do on the way to and from the field every day or before you ride. It's so easy to fit into the routine, and I wish more people would do it, because it can have such a difference on the horse's posture and musculoskeletal comfort. Definitely.
I couldn't second that any more. I've often thought in the English world that's probably the Achilles heel, that there's so little backing that's done, or that they wait until these many years have been put in before we start with it. And I think that is just such a missed opportunity, and it's such an easy window into collection. If you get a horse backing well, collection is so much easier to accomplish. I've had some arguments with some dressage trainers about that they really don't seem to find much value in it. And I'm like, if you just tried it for a year and gave it an honest shot, you would never agree with what you just said. Again, you would see how much value there is in it. You just don't know. You haven't ever done it, so you don't know how valuable it is. But anyway,
absolutely.
Well, Gillian will be in the U.S. She'll be in Virginia at the North American Saddlery School at the end of September and into October. She does have a tremendous online presence. We'll, of course, have links to her website and social media. She's got YouTube channel and Facebook and all of that stuff. And I think it's pretty obvious what a tremendous resource she is and how knowledgeable she is on all this stuff. And also, we always do have people that are very knowledgeable but are not very good at teaching, and Gillian certainly excels at that. If you ever get an opportunity to join in on one of her presentations, I would highly recommend it. And she's funny as hell too. I feel like I've held you back here a little bit, but in her presentations, you will be laughing your butt off the whole way through. So, Gillian, I definitely appreciate your time with us this morning. I hope we'll get to present together at another event down the road. I have a final question for you, and it is, how surprised were you when a country bumpkin from America clued you in on an anatomical fact that you were unaware of at a presentation? And that is a fact, of course, that male horses lack nipples. Did you find that shocking?
I was highly amused. And I knew you were going to bring that up.
I have to. It's an imperative. I'm going to become known as the horse nipple guy or something like that. I need to shut up about it. But it's just such a great little thing to throw out there, because people think they know. And then when you point out this obvious thing you haven't noticed for 30 years, then maybe they listen a little bit more, right? Anyway. All right.
I love it. Daniel, I'd like to say a huge thank you for inviting me onto this podcast. I've really enjoyed it, and I hope all your listeners have too. You're doing good work, and I look forward to hearing more about your podcast coming through.
Well, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
We'll see you next week for another episode of Adult Onset Horsemanship. I've been your host, Daniel Dolphin.